I first remember going to Mass, I somehow immediately fell in love with God and Our Lady and the saints, and I just assumed it was my job. I was going to be a priest, and I announced it to my family, and of course everybody laughed at me. But I think I must have been so young, quite a little girl, that, that intellectually I didn't understand why I couldn't be a priest. They told me it was because I was a girl, but I didn't understand, so I thought, they told me I had to be a nun. I thought, oh, all right, I'll be a nun then, you know. So I think since little I had a very strong connection with religion, with God. I loved going to Mass. At a certain point I'd go to Mass every single morning by my bicycle off to Mass, you know. We lived in Murrumbina in Melbourne. I was the second of 7 kids. But I didn't talk about it much. I just assumed everybody thought this way, you know. It was very deep inside me, I think. And the main thing that concerned me was that I would think about the meaning of life and who God was and what God was, and how I was fascinated by the idea that God was everywhere. It really it was very much a part of how I thought every day, trying to understand, but also trying to understand. I wanted to know why. Why this, why that, why happiness, why suffering. I was always wanting answers, and not just to have faith, you know. I went to a course in Queensland at a Tibetan Buddhist centre that I'm now associated with. And the teachers were Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who are now, in fact, my teachers. That was my first course. I didn't know I was looking for something called Buddhist, but I just somehow, the circumstances demanded that I went there. And I was there for a couple of months, and I knew immediately this is somehow the philosophical approach I wanted, although I didn't understand much of it. And my heart felt at home, but I had to really struggle with it. I had to really think it through, which incidentally is the Buddhist approach. Don't just swallow it whole. It's not a faith-based system in the sense that you just blindly believe it. Buddha would say that's really inappropriate. And so what really I liked, the things that triggered for me, when I heard about karma, and when I heard about how Buddha would say we're not created by anybody. I think the fundamental points that define you as a Buddhist is the Buddhist view that we're not created by anybody else, that our mind or our consciousness, which Buddha would say isn't physical, that has the grosser levels, you know, but also has much more subtle levels, which maybe the Catholics might call the soul. But the Buddha would say that's a beginningless continuity of mental moments, like a river of energy. And so at the time of conception, roughly speaking, you could say that if you're a materialist, mummy and daddy, the egg and sperm come together and that's it. If you're a Christian, a Catholic, for example, speaking simply, God puts the soul there, and that's essentially who you are. But the Buddhist approach is the consciousness wasn't yet called Robina, coming from before, went into that egg and sperm. So in a sense, Buddha's saying that we are our own person, that we don't come from anybody else. Our body does, thank you very much, but our mind is our own, and this is the meaning of karma, that essentially what we are now is the product of what we've done before. And what we do now produces who we will become. So, I mean, you could say in a simple sense that Buddha's saying we create ourselves. Not in a sort of the classic sense of creation, but in an evolutionary sense of we're a bunch of habits and this type of thing. So that's the view that I found, and I do find extremely appealing. And then, of course, experiential implications of that other point, that it demands that you're accountable, that you're responsible, that you can change. Because Buddha also says, and this is what I like very much, that each one of us can become perfect. I mean, my Catholic mum was shocked by that. But the Buddha would say, what's the meaning of the word Buddha or enlightened? Fully developed. The Buddha would say that this mind, or every being has mind, their mind can naturally fully develop to perfection. Infinite, all the perfect good qualities, omniscient, all-knowing, all-loving, all-wise, all-compassionate, and completely free of all neuroses. That's the essence of the Buddhist view, I'd say. One of my teachers, Lama Yeshe, says being a Buddhist is you need to be your own therapist. Actually, the Buddha's, his expertise is the mind. So in a way you could say he's a psychologist. I mean, it sounds kind of quaint, but it's really actually true because he talks about mind or consciousness. He doesn't use the word soul at all. And he says that this mind of ours, which for him goes to far more subtle, more refined levels than we would posit in our ordinary materialist models, this can be known by us. And this is the job. He says this mind of ours, this consciousness, has the potential to be perfect, quite literally. So if you have to work on your mind, you have to have tools to let you to enable you to see it, and that's what meditation is. So the basic technique, and this is ancient technique. This is way back from pre-Buddha. This is from the Hindus. You know, Buddha just took these techniques and worked with them. The fundamental technique that's used as the basis of all others is simply a technique to enable you to concentrate your mind, but to go to much more subtle levels, much more subtle, more refined levels of awareness that it normally we wouldn't even posit as existing and that we have no way of accessing. So there's actually super sophisticated psychological techniques, basically. So the immediate benefit, even just after, you might not get this, what they call single-pointed concentration, which is quite an advanced state, But immediate benefit is that what you're doing is by focusing your mind for 5 minutes a day, 3 minutes a day, an hour a day, depending on your skill, what you're doing is consciously refraining from involving yourself in the day-to-day constant chatter in the mind. You're not making it go away, that's foolish. You're stepping back from it and focusing on one thing and not engaging. And so the inevitable consequence from this, which is the point, is that you get to see more clearly, hear more clearly what on earth is happening inside you, so that in the daily life you don't fall into all the traps of being pulled from pillar to post by all the dramas and the fights and the miseries. But you're conscious of what on earth is going on, so you become more in control of yourself and your life. I try to explain the Buddhist view in a way that hopefully is practical and grounded, and that we can come away from it feeling it's doable, that I can do it, that basically Buddha is saying we've got this phenomenal potential, it's up to us to cultivate it, we can do this, and giving the tools to how to do it. And for me, the main one, even to walk away from something, is to think, well, wow, maybe it's true, maybe I can do it. Maybe even the more simple way, saying we can become less neurotic, less miserable, less jealous, less depressed, more wise, more loving, more content. That's the point, Extend it all the way, Buddhahood, enlightenment, but that's the logical conclusion. But even day to day, to try and show, because I think, look at our culture, look everywhere, we might have all the marvellous rich things and we know all this, we have all the material things, but we're miserable, depressed, lonely, jealous, angry, and don't know why, and don't know how to solve it. This is the stuff of being a Buddhist, I would say. It's not as if Buddha owns this. He didn't create all this, but he runs with this stuff. This is the stuff that makes you a Buddhist. In the simple sense, the technical sense, I'm not a Christian. In a technical sense, I'm a Buddhist. And if I look into my mind, my view is a Buddhist view. I have the view of reincarnation. I take the view of the Buddhist philosophy. I'm running with that, The Buddhist idea would be that you're working with that and you're verifying and experiencing it as you go along. I would say definitely that is my view. That's my worldview. But I can't say it doesn't incorporate Christian views and communist views, because view is just how you see things. It's just how you see it. If you've got a very narrow mind, you would see it as exclusive. But I think the more you open your mind, the more expansive you can be, the more you can see how things there's so much common ground. I can't possibly say I'm not a Christian in the broader sense. Of course I am. But in the actual sense of having faith in Jesus as my saviour, no, I'm not that. But I see so much common ground, and at a philosophical level. A dear friend of mine is a Jesuit, an American young man who's just finished his training. We had marvellous talks about the nature of Buddha nature and the nature of what God is. There's very similar stuff there, and that I delight in that.